Good morning. My name's Michael Kahn. I'm an Irrigation Water Resources Farm Advisor and based in Salinas. I serve Monterey, San Benito, and Santa Cruz counties. And today I'm going to give you the basics about irrigation management in tree crops. So, as most of you realize, water management is really critical to growing healthy trees. If you don't apply enough water when the trees need it, it ultimately results in stressing the trees, which can reduce growth and reduce yield. In extreme conditions, you may see some of these symptoms like tip burn or distorted leaf margins or just yellowing of the leaves. On the other hand, applying too much water to your trees um, makes them susceptible to soil-borne diseases. Also, under wet conditions, the soils become anaerobic and roots need oxygen to be healthy. And so you can get crown rot and other root diseases from Phytophthora. So the key to optimizing irrigation management in orchards is number one, assure that your irrigation system applies water evenly throughout your blocks. Number two, you need to schedule irrigations to match the water needs of the trees. So we'll talk about both of those in this discussion today. So we recognize there's various methods for irrigating orchards. Sometimes we use micro sprinklers or drip, overhead sprinklers, or even flood irrigation. Although flood irrigation is less and less common, and we see much more use of micro sprinklers and drip. So let's talk about maintaining drip and micro sprinklers. First is they have small orifices. So it's very important to prevent them from clogging. And so you need to have a filter that is serviced regularly and cleaned. Sometimes you need to flush the lateral lines, and if you have leaks, fix those. Micro sprinklers sometimes get knocked around, and so you want to check on their orientation. You want to make sure they're not plugged. Same with drip emitters. And then if you see any broken micro sprinklers or plugged emitters, they have to be replaced. Overhead sprinklers, very similar. You need to operate them correctly and maintain them. Sometimes we see that the nozzles in the overhead sprinklers are worn or the heads are broken, they don't turn. Sometimes I use a drill bit to just check whether the nozzles are worn. So if you have a 7/64 nozzle, you can use a 7/64 drill bit. If it's loose, then the nozzle is worn. Also, make sure you're using the same size nozzles in all areas of the block. The riser height is similar. You're using similar similar sprinkler head types. You may have gaskets in the pipe that are leaking, so those have to be replaced. And just leaks that are in the pipes or in the fittings should be fixed. The other part that's very critical is to optimize the pressure for the nozzle size and the soil type, and have the right lateral spacing. Also critical for micro sprinklers as well as sprinklers is they operate in low wind conditions. In the Salinas Valley, for example, we have a lot of wind, and that can greatly reduce the uniformity of the application. So periodically, it is a good idea to evaluate the application uniformity of your irrigation system. And when we have drip irrigation or sprinklers or micro sprinklers, we can collect a volume of water that's discharged per unit time and measure that in different areas of the irrigation block or in the orchard. So in this example, show you how we estimate the distribution uniformity of the lowest or driest quarter. And so in different locations, we might monitor how much water is discharged from a micro sprinkler. And we do this in a grid throughout the orchard. And we identify the volumes that are the lowest 25%. And we take the average of those lowest volumes and divide by the average of all the measurements we collected. This is called the distribution uniformity of the lowest quarter. And in this example, the average of the lowest quarter is 202 milliliters. And we would make these measurements over maybe 10 minutes of collection time, but it has to be consistent in every location. And then we divide it by the average of all the measurements, in this case, 235, and we get 0.86 or 86%. Now, if the volumes were equal in every location in this orchard, then when we did this math, we would come up with 1 or 100%. So that would be perfect uniformity. 86%, though, is still pretty good. It means the driest area is getting about 86% of what the average is. And so to make that drier area wet, sufficiently wet, you'd have to irrigate a bit longer, right? So a few more tips about using drip and micro sprinklers. If you are using micro sprinklers, you want to try to keep the trunks dry. And so sometimes you can get heads with stream splitters or ones with 270 or 300 degree patterns, so you don't wet the trunks, and that makes it more susceptible to diseases. You do want to monitor the pressure in the irrigation block periodically, actually with every irrigation if possible, and regulate the pressure of the block at the sub-main or even on the lateral lines. If you have the option, you could use pressure compensating emitters or sprinklers. In this way, if the pressure fluctuates, you put out a similar application rate in all areas of the block. And micro sprinklers, as well as drip, are very affected by the operating pressure. They put out more water per unit time if the pressure is higher. So I'm just going to illustrate for the Bo Smith fan jet at 18 psi. It puts out 8.3 gallons per hour. If the pressure goes up, it's putting out 11.1, which is an increase of 33, almost 34%. So if you had variation in pressure during the irrigation, or one irrigation was operated at a lower pressure than another, you're putting different amounts of water out, which makes irrigation scheduling more difficult because you don't know how much water your system's putting out per unit time. So it is important to monitor the pressure, if possible, throughout your irrigation system. You can do this at the irrigation block, but there's other locations you also want to monitor it. But before we go into all those spots that is critical to monitor pressure, let me just explain that it's a little more complicated than it seems. Often we have mechanical pressure gauges on the irrigation system, but we often find as they get old, they become inaccurate or they become broken. And even new mechanical pressure gauges can be inaccurate. We found in our work that they have variation of 1 to 2 psi, which is about a 5% to 10% error if you're running your system at 20 psi. What we recommend is using a calibrated pressure gauge together with Schrader valves that you locate at different locations in your irrigation system to monitor the pressure. So you could put these before filter stations and after filter stations, at the submain of your irrigation block, at the end of your lateral lines, or even at the beginning of your lateral lines. And then you use a calibrated pressure gauge with a Schrader adapter to monitor the pressure at these different locations. The nice thing is you're using the same gauge in all locations. And even if it's off by 1 or 2 psi, you can compare the pressure relative to different locations. It's like comparing apples with apples. It's a good idea to regulate the pressure of micro irrigation systems, and there are pressure regulators that are fixed, but they're specific for a range of flow rates. And so you always want to know the flow rate of your system when you choose these pressure regulators. There's adjustable pressure regulators, such as this, which give you a wider range of flow rates usually. And so they're able to be used in multiple size irrigation blocks. But these also need to be outfitted for the flow rate. So they have a range of flow rates they'll work with. You need to train your irrigators on how to use them if you want them to be used correctly. Now, if you get your irrigation to work nice and uniformly, right, your irrigation system's operating uniformly, you still need to apply the right amount of water to meet the demand of your trees. And irrigation scheduling is the combination of deciding when to irrigate and how much to irrigate. The main decisions in scheduling irrigations for trees are first, when to start irrigating in the spring. Often we have wet winters or dry winters, and so that will determine when you need to start irrigating. Once you start irrigating for the season, then it's really a question of how much water to apply and how often to irrigate. Some of the considerations are the age and maturity of the trees, the canopy size, the root distribution and rooting depth, the soil water holding capacity, which is related to soil texture, how much winter rainfall you've gotten, and the tolerance to water stress, and potential for root and crown diseases. And I will mention, it's not listed here, but salinity is another consideration. So if you begin the season with high salinity in the soil, you may want to do a leaching irrigation. Other considerations are that you need adequate soil moisture for trees as they come out of dormancy, because the roots, as they get active, they need to be in moist soil. Irrigating to replenish deep soil moisture during the growing season can oversaturate the top layers of soil. So if you're trying to go for deep moisture, you may have to do this in a series of irrigations to get that water deep, to give the roots time to have enough oxygen and breathe. If you saturate them too long, you're making them more susceptible to soil-borne diseases. Usually we can't irrigate trees during harvest because we need to get in there with equipment. And so you have to plan ahead depending on when the harvest is. Irrigating for this year, you're also irrigating for this year's and next year's crop. So you have to keep in mind if you stress the crop this year or you over irrigate this year, you're affecting not just the harvest for this year, but also for next year. So a good tool is to use flow meters, and you can put those on irrigation blocks. You can read them at the pump, but basically they're a good way to measure how much water you're applying. And you can evaluate if you're over irrigating or deficit irrigating by comparing the volume to the amount of water that the tree needs using estimates of crop ET. If you connect or interface these flow meters with a data logger, you can automatically record how much water you're applying and when you're applying the water. You could also troubleshoot operational problems because you could see if you have variation in flow. You can see over time if you have lower and lower flow, maybe the drip emitters are getting plugged, or if the flow suddenly goes way up, you may have a big leak somewhere. But these images show some of the examples of flow meters that we've used for monitoring how much water is applied in irrigation blocks. So there are various approaches to irrigation scheduling. There's weather-based methods, there's plant-based method, and there's soil-based methods. All these methods can be used for irrigation scheduling of tree crops. Weather-based methods are relying on evapotranspiration data. And evapotranspiration is really just the combination of the amount of water lost through the soil surface by evaporation and the amount of water lost through the leaf surfaces, which is transpiration. So the combination we call evapotranspiration. We are fortunate in California to have a network of weather stations that monitor evapotranspiration, and these stations are usually situated on a well-watered grass, which we call a reference crop. And you can use the ET, the evapotranspiration data, and adjust it using a crop coefficient to figure out how much water your crop may need. And the reference ET data are published on the California Irrigation Management and Information System, or CIMMYS, website daily. And you can also access it through various softwares that will download it automatically. To adjust the reference ET to the ET of your crop, use this crop coefficient, which will vary through the season. It will depend really on the canopy size. That's how it is related. And we'll talk more about how you can make these calculations. So for various tree crops and different regions in California, the crop coefficients have been determined through experimentation. And so this is an example for walnut in Tehama County. And the research that Alan Fulton did has shown the crop coefficient will start quite low, about 0.5 in the beginning of the season, and reaches a peak around 1 and then declines as you get towards harvest. In young orchards, we have to make adjustments to the crop coefficient or the ET calculation based on canopy cover. And one way you can do this is evaluate the canopy through the amount of, or the percent area that is shaded during midday. And you can even take a picture, overlay a grid on it, and then count how many of the squares are in the shaded area, such as shown here in this example. And so we get a canopy cover of 41%. And for a young tree, that means we need to figure out the T of the mature crop and then multiply it by 0.67 to figure out what it would be for a young tree crop. So we're reducing it based on the canopy cover, but we use this table to sort of figure out what that conversion should be. Now, once you know how much water the trees need, you need to convert the depth of water they need into a runtime. To do this, you first have to figure out your field application rate of your irrigation system. And this equation just shows you how you could do this with drip emitters or micro sprinklers. But basically, you would multiply the discharge rate of your micro sprinklers in gallons per hour by the number of sprinklers per tree times this constant of 1.604, and then divide it by the spacing of the trees in row and between rows. So in this example, 8 gallons per hour times 1 micro sprinkler per tree times 1.6 divided by 16 and divided by 22 equals essentially 0.036 inches per hour. That's what the irrigation system is putting on average if you run it at the correct pressure. Now, once you have your application rate of your irrigation system, you can convert how much to irrigate to how long to irrigate. This example, if we know the crop ET, we calculate that is 1.6 inches per week. Then we divide by the field application rate of 0.036 inches per hour. And we get 44 hours to irrigate during that week. Now, you wouldn't want to irrigate continuously for 44 hours. You would just totally saturate the soil, depending on the soil type. So you'd probably split these irrigations up, maybe 2, 3, or 4 irrigations over the week. Now, if you're finding, all these calculations a little complicated, well, we have developed an online tool that can help you do this pretty automatically. It's called Crop Manage. It's an online irrigation and nutrient management decision support tool. And the URL is there if you want to sign up and try it out. It's completely free to use. So Crop Manage can be used to quickly get an ET-based irrigation recommendation. And once you set up your orchard in Crop Manage, then at that point you can schedule an irrigation by putting the date you want to irrigate. You've already put in information about your irrigation system, so it knows your application rate and your uniformity. And so then you calculate recommendation, and it will automatically pull in the reference ET value and figure out your crop coefficient, the amount of days since you last irrigated, and give you a recommendation, in this case, 13 hours. Now, for any of these irrigation recommendations, you can find out how Crop Manage calculated it. So just you click on that and they have a summary. So it shows you the average ET per day, the crop coefficient, the uniformity, days since last irrigation, precipitation, all this information's there. And you can even see the equations used to get that recommendation. And Crop Manage includes graphs to help you visualize your irrigation data. So if you're putting in all your irrigations, you can compare the recommendation cumulatively over the season with what was applied. And we also have a soil water balance calculation that sort of shows you how full the profile was as you went through the season. So the black marks here, these black symbols, are rain events, and the green are irrigation amounts. And so we can do calculations about how full the soil profile is as you go through the season. No sensors needed. However, soil moisture sensors can be a nice check for your irrigation scheduling. And there's two classes of soil moisture sensors: tension-based, which are measuring how much energy it is for the plant to pull water from the soil, and volumetric, which is the volume of water held in the soil. Tension-based sensors can be used in many situations with tree crops. I would recommend them if you're not drying down the soil too much. If you are, then you would probably want to use volumetric based sensors, because as the tensions get higher and higher, they're very hard to interpret. And also, if you're using something like a tensiometer, they have limitation of how high they can go. So this is an example of using a volumetric sensor at 4 different depths, 12 to 48 inches. And you can see different layers. As they irrigate, you can see the top layer wetting up, but you see the lower layers drying out over the season, over the summer. And it's not till about October everything starts wetting up again. So they can be very useful as a cross-check of your irrigation, and you can see how deep the water is penetrating. Another approach is to monitor the stem and leaf water potential of your trees. And there's various pressure bomb devices available to do this. One is in the middle that is pumped up. The other uses gas to create the pressure. And so what you do is put the leaf petiole into this, and you're going to increase the pressure slowly until it bubbles, and you're going to figure out the water potential of the leaf. As it creates, you create more pressure to get that water to come out. It means the leaf is under more water stress. Now, typically, the best way to do this in many of the tree crops is measure what's called this midday stem water potential. And so midday, you put a foil over the leaf, which closes the stomata, and then the leaf will come in equilibrium with the rest of the tree. And then you would measure the water potential. And you can interpret those values from low water stress here to very high water stress conditions. And we have publications available on how to make those measurements and how to interpret them for a number of commodities, tree commodities, that you might be interested to learn more about. Some other methods that you could use to sort of check how you're doing with your irrigation are continuously monitoring with using sensors. So there's sap flow sensors, which measure the flow of the water in the xylem, dendrometers to measure the expansion and contraction of the trunk of the tree, and stem water potential sensors, which actually insert into the wood of the tree and can monitor the water potential of the tree. All of them require some automated instrumentation, such as a data logger, to interface with the sensors. And one trick is that you have to get a very representative tree. Otherwise, the data can be a bit misleading. It's a useful tool to show you relative differences as you go through the season. It's less useful for figuring out exactly how much water you should irrigate with. So it gives you a lot of background of how, an example tree is doing, but I would not use it to figure out exactly how much water to apply. It would be sort of I guess, a experimental way to try to figure out how to irrigate, and you'd have to do trial and error to figure out the right amount of water to use using these type of methods. So I'll just summarize. You know, we went through a lot this morning, but the main points are over or under irrigating can harm your trees or reduce yield. You need to evaluate and in many cases upgrade your irrigation system so the water you apply is even throughout the orchard. And try to optimize the operation of your irrigation system and attend to regular maintenance. Crop evapotranspiration is a good way to estimate how much water your trees need, but using soil moisture monitoring or leaf or stem water potential is probably one of the best ways to determine if you're irrigating correctly and cross-check that you're putting on the right amount of water. So I'll end by just mentioning there's often opportunities through grants and rebates to receive upgrades to your irrigation system. And often there's free consultation that's available to help you improve your irrigation system. So please take advantage of all these opportunities. Us at UC Cooperative Extension are available on the coast to help growers. And there's rebate programs through the Pajaro Valley Water Management Agency through the Santa Clara Valley Water District. And there's a mobile lab surface also available through Santa Clara Valley Water District. And I will end here and thank you very much for your attention.